Tonight we are going to be discussing some big decisions the Bills have along their offensive line, specifically what to do at both guard spots, a position that held the Bills back at times in 2020. Who should they bring back, why, and where they should play? Then we dive into what traits the Bills look for in offensive linemen and break down 3 offensive linemen who could be available for the Bills. Alabama's Landon Dickerson, Oklahoma's Humphrey, and Ohio State's Wyatt Davis are 3 very talented hog mollies who the Bills will likely be targeting in the 2021 NFL Draft. This is going to be a fun episode. Let's get this thing rolling. Welcome back into the film room. I'm your host, Eric Turner. As always, we appreciate you joining us tonight, and we appreciate Anthony again joining me in the film room. He's a guy that I go back and forth with each day, breaking down some film in the DMs, as they say. Anthony from Disguise Coverage, welcome back into the film room, buddy.
I appreciate you having me again. And for, I think, the 3rd week in a row now, it snowed a lot here that every day. And it seems like the weather knows, like, oh, Anthony and Eric are doing the film room today. All right, cool. We're going to bring a little bit of a storm and snow like crazy and kind of mess up Wi-Fi and internet and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure, once we get the film going and everything, we'll have a couple glitches here and there. But as always, I appreciate you joining me again. We're going to have next week. We were just talking about it. Next week, we're going to be going Wednesday night at 7 because we have a special guest in the film room with myself, and that is the running back from Buffalo, Jarrett Patterson. He and I will be breaking down some of his film from 2020 and 2019, kind of highlighting his, football IQ and some of his, obviously, skills. Apparently, he met with the Bills. I talked to him about that today, asking some general questions. Sometimes this time of year, especially if they're not able to meet with these guys at the Senior Bowl, there's no in-person meetings. You're meeting with these teams virtually. A lot of these scouts haven't really gotten a chance to go to their school and get the background information, just simple background information. What weight did you play at? What's your height? All little things like that scouts are really scouring to get now and get for their team. So Patterson will join me in the film room next week, Wednesday at 7 Eastern. So be on the lookout for that. And I'll be posting film on him throughout the entire week, kind of like you see me do, throughout the week to leading into these film rooms. And one of the guys that you guys saw me break down a lot today was Cody Ford, and we're going to get to him. We're going to get to Boettger. We're going to get to John Feliciano, some of the Bills offensive line in today's episode, as I said in the intro. So let's get to some, before we get to all that, let's get to some current events, some news, while everyone lets us know where they're tuning in from. Let's get into some news from Adam Schefter today. He tweeted out that Kawann Short, the defensive tackle from the Carolina Panthers, was released today. And a guy that has had issues with availability the last couple of years, but plays defensive tackle. He's a big body. He's a guy that the Bills are probably kicking the tires on, wouldn't you say, Anthony?
Yeah, I think just off of how Bean and co do their due diligence, I think he's someone they'd kick the tires on. And then from a fan's perspective, we've seen it. You were fully engaged in it today with some other content creators and the discussion and debate around him. People see, oh, he's an ex-Carolina Panther. Oh, he plays a position of need along the defensive line. Oh, he used to be basically like a former all-pro and really great. Oh, he can be like Darrell Williams. Oh, reclamation project. Oh, and everybody throws out these comps and comparisons, and it becomes somewhat of a natural fit in people's minds. And I don't think it would necessarily be as ideal and as perfect of a fit as some people are trying to lead us to believe, but I definitely think that he's someone Bean and company will kick the tires on. And to be honest, he's worth it. If you can bring him in for a good enough value on a 1-year cheapy, prove it type of deal, or have some type of, oh, thank you, Buff Wagon, appreciate you with the donation there. If you can bring him on some deal that's advantageous to the team and doesn't carry a lot of risk, and there's, a high chance for return on investment based on the details of the contract, I'm all for it. We need help in that area. And he's a guy who's worked really well with Star Lotulelei in the past in Carolina. Bean and McDermott are familiar with him. And if it works, cool. But I wouldn't hang your hat on that, oh man, all our defensive tackle issues are going to be solved by throwing some money at Kawann Short and then bringing him in.
Yeah, and he's only played 200, just over 200 snaps the last 2 years. And, he had several injuries, I believe some shoulder injuries in there. I went and watched his film today just from 2020. I didn't get too deep into it. Just want to see, what he looks like. He looks a lot thicker and bigger than he was a few years ago when he was, at that upper level of defensive tackles in the league. And he was, for a long time, for a good stretch, he was a premier defensive tackle in the league. But I think he's on the tail end of his career is what, 32, 31, 32 or something 32. Like that. Yeah. So he's not your Jordan Phillips. He's not your Darrell Williams. He's not in that prime of his career where he's got tools and traits that were never maximized by a coaching staff. He's on the tail end of his career, and you can tell there's not much left in his legs. He plays more of a 3-tech. Now, the Panthers kind of switched over to more of an odd front the last couple years. So there were times where he was kicked out to a 4-eye or 5, but there are also times he was just head up over the center. And I think he is a big, wide body that can take on double teams. And, of course, the Bills do need guys like that. So I'm with Anthony. I understand why fans are making that instant connection to the Bills, which it's going to happen. They probably were the first ones to call him, had him on speed dial as soon as he hit the market. I'm cool with that, but just do not invest heavily in him because it worries me about his availability, and Bean always preaches that. And so I think that, yes, take a look at him. I think he would probably switch a little bit back and forth between 3-tech and nose tackle. But for most of his career, he has been a 3-tech. That's the only drawback I have with bringing him in, especially if you're trying to link him to, we're going to cut Butler, we're going to cut Jefferson, we're going to cut Addison, all these other subtractions. And then you're plugging this guy in just because if he fits under the salary, so that you can use that money in other places. I understand the gymnastics to do that. But as we talked about prior to going live, Anthony, I think that hurts you in two positions. That hurts you at defensive tackle, and that hurts you at defensive end, because Quentin Jefferson is a guy that has that flexibility. And I think that once in the proper position of playing 3-tech, mainly behind, at Oliver, and, he can get some reps at edge player as well. Quentin Jefferson, that is.
Yeah, the versatility potential that Jefferson has is something that is helpful in general, let alone in an offseason and a time where you can't spend all this money on multiple people. So having somebody who can fill multiple roles up front is very helpful. And you take a guy like Jefferson, we talk about Ed Oliver and the role that he was kind of thrust into last year because of Starla Tulele being out. Quentin Jefferson had a very similar experience. He wasn't really able to wear the hats that he thrives in and what he can do. And that's also my cautionary thing with bringing in Kawann Short is, regardless of what happens, Greg Thompson, he hit it on the head today with talking about like moves are coming with where the Bills are at the cap and the holes that they have to fill. So robbing Peter to pay Paul is not an ideal situation. If you're banking on someone like Kawann Short coming in and you have to cut X amount of people to bring him in, you still have to then fill those roles. And your example right there of cutting, like, okay, we're cutting Jefferson, we're cutting Butler, we're cutting Addison. If you're cutting Jefferson and Addison, then you're looking at your defensive end grouping as you're just Jerry Hughes, AJ Epinesa, and Daryl Johnson. And then you have to make further assumptions on the development of Johnson and Epinesa. And then you still have to bring in more people to round out that position grouping and still have depth. So it's not like it's a holistic cure-all. You hit it on the head as well. Like those gymnastics in terms of financial gymnastics and roster gymnastics, it's not so straightforward. It's not a like for like, replacement and a cure-all, as I think some people want to make it seem. It's not cut and dry like it was with Darrell Williams, which was one, a different salary cap situation. Two, okay, we got a guy, we got a need, boom, good. We don't have to cut anybody. We don't have to release this or do this. We're not in trouble here. It's a different scenario, and I caution people just making blanket statements and assumptions around it. I do completely agree that they should kick the tires on him. It's always worth a shot. I would never say never to anything, but I caution people just thinking it's a cure-all and it's going to be great.
Yeah, I mean, they've gone to that well numerous times, and for the most part, I don't think it's been all that successful. I know you could argue Addison last year, but if you look at it as contract and what he did, I think you can make a debate. There's a debate on both sides whether it was worth it or not. And so I understand, getting rid of him. And even I went back and listened to his end of season presser today, and he mentioned how the cap's changing. They're going to be strapped. Every team is going to be strapped. And he talked about, if they had known it was going to be this low when they had estimated it was going to be 210, 215, something like that. If they knew a year ago that it was going to be this low and they were going to be that strapped, they probably wouldn't have made some of those moves and been as aggressive at certain spots. And when he said that, I go, defensive tackle, defensive end, like he threw some serious money at that defensive line, which I understood why. We understand why they needed some pass rushing elements there, and they had some other options, but they went that route and got guys they knew of, such as Addison. And again, you can debate whether it worked or not, but if the fact that there's talk that they may have to cut a guy like Addison, it kind of tells you where Bean is probably thinking he wouldn't have been as aggressive last year. So with that said, let's get into some upcoming news on the offensive line. It's a hog molly show, as our boys in the chat have been saying. Hog mollies everywhere. So we're going to talk about the offensive line, and we're going to talk about specifically the interior offensive line. But when we went into this show, I wanted to take a look at, okay, what are we working with? What's the draft, or what's the depth chart look like before we go into free agency and before we go into the draft? And so I'm looking at this. I start setting it up, and I'm like, okay, Dawkins is locked in. Mitch Morse, as of right now, is locked in. And then, obviously the right guard and right tackle spots are kind of up in the air, as is the left guard spot. So to me, after looking at all the film today, Cody Ford, we're going to get into him a little bit more here in a second, but Ike Boettger is a restricted free agent. He's down, not under contract, as you guys can see. You have Feliciano right here under right guard, who is also not under contract, obviously. And then Darrell Williams is the big ticket guy at right tackle, who is likely to hit the market and see what his value is. So there are some holes as far as starters go, but if you look at some of the depth here, you see Ryan Bates. I put him in several spots because he really can play all the spots across the offensive line. He's done so at the NFL level. He's done so at the college level. And so he's a guy they've been wanting to groom, kind of like Ike Boettger. They've been infatuated with him for the last couple of years. So I think they not only need starters, but they also need some depth as well, man, right?
Yeah, if you're looking at that spot again, I think a lot of people focus on the starters and focus on, okay, who's going to play right guard, who's going to play right tackle, what happens with John Feliciano, what happens with Darrell Williams. But then we're also sitting there looking at Ty Nsekhe and the role that he's played. And I think that's a good piece there that you mentioned with Bates and even Boettger to a degree. The depth that the Bills have had at offensive line, one, just in terms of how many people they've had and who they've had, but also the positional versatility. And it may not be the best. You don't have a guy on the bench who can be an all-pro at 3 different positions, but you've had people that are able to flex into, okay, this guy's a guard, but he can flex into center if need be. Okay, this guy's a guard, but he can play a little tackle if need be, or he can play both guard spots. That type of positional versatility and depth that they've had on the offensive line holistically, just again, in terms of number, but in terms of number of players, but then the hats that those players can wear has been a really helpful thing over the past couple of years. And going into this offseason, we have to fill the starters. That is obviously priority number one. But you mentioned it, that depth piece. Who do we have to back these guys up? Who do we have to fill in and wear multiple hats like we have had in the past couple of years, ever since the Bills revamped the offensive line 2 off seasons ago?
Yeah, and so let's start with the left side here, the restricted free agent Boettger. He's a guy, as I said, the staff has liked him for a long time. He's versatile. He's played right tackle in college. He played right tackle. He played left guard in college as well. Obviously played a lot of left guard for the Bills last year, and I thought he did all right. He's a developmental type player that has come a long way, but he's very one-dimensional. As you saw when we broke down some of the running film, it was tough to watch at times. And I saw several clips where he was on the turf a lot of times, especially in the playoffs. He ended up, being on the turf a lot. And when you guys are scouting offensive linemen, that's one thing I always say, hey, keep a count or tally how many times that offensive lineman is on the ground, because that's not usually a good thing. That's usually a sign of lacking athleticism, the balance and ability to maintain your balance and stay on your feet. I mean, that's number one as far as football goes. But I think he could be labeled as a replacement level player. I think they could absolutely upgrade, but given his low price and for what he did last year, I think he's at the very least a guy you bring back, and then a guy that will compete with Cody Ford at left guard.
Yeah, he's a person. That's a really good microcosm of what this offseason is going to look like. And looking at terms of the risk reward and return on investment for starters, for replacement players. Okay, who can be like a Swiss Army knife and do multiple things? And Boettger's a good example with that, where he's obviously not someone who I want to trot out as my every down starter for a 16-game season. But what we saw in 2020, like you mentioned, he did some things well, and he solidified the left guard spot to a decent degree. Was he an all-pro? Was he tremendous? No. Does he have deficiencies? Yes. And his play style does limit the Bills' offense to some degree, but I'm comfortable having him as a backup given the price that he should come in with, given the money that we're going to need to spend in other areas. And as you mentioned it, he's someone that the staff seems to like, and his versatility, albeit not amazing, he's somebody who can get the job done. I'm comfortable if, say Cody Ford starts at left guard and then he goes down for a game or two. I'm okay trotting out Boettger for a game or two. I don't want him starting all 16, right. And I would like to have a better backup option. But again, we are in a nuclear winter, and this offseason, it's not the ideal one to be able to just throw money at backups and have a bunch of money spent in a whole bunch of areas because everybody's going to be cash strapped.
Yeah. And so, I have Cody Ford slotted in there at left guard, but you really could say that Boettger, if under contract, is probably the starter, just the way he played last year and has proven himself to the offensive staff. And he's a guy that when we talk about Landon Dickerson later, he's a guy to keep in mind because Ike Boettger is a really big guard. He is 6'6", just like Dickerson is. And so when we talk about Dickerson, we're going to get into some of his traits and his size and height and all that good stuff. That's something to keep in mind because guards at that height, or center for that matter, aren't common. And some coaches and some schemes don't want guys that big. They want more the short, squatty guys that can hold the point of attack with their leverage, but be quick in that regard in a phone booth. So Boettger he's a tall guy. Again, he played tackle at Iowa, and he came from that zone running scheme. And really, that's why he is a guy that's replaceable as far as a starter goes, because he's more of a pass blocker, and his run blocking is very limited. He's more of a zone running guy. He's not a guy that can pull that well. He's not a guy that can execute, down blocks in the gap schemes and things along those lines. Not a guy that's can, powerfully move a guy vertically or displace him on his own. So, but Cody Ford is, man. Cody Ford is that guy. I know he was drafted, quite early in the second round, and a guy that started outside at right tackle. He played it his final year at Oklahoma, but I think, Bill Bedenbaugh, the coach at Oklahoma, the offensive line coach, said it years ago that, yeah, I would start him at tackle, but I think he's an all-pro guard. And, even at guard, they started him at right guard this season, for a couple games because Feliciano was out. Fine, I understood that. They had Quentin Spain at the same time, so he was playing left guard. Understandable. But when they put him at left guard, Cody Ford, that is, I thought he really started to come on in that third game. It was a little rough in the third game because he was playing against Aaron Donald, pretty much play in and play out, Michael Brocker. So when you talk about the talent he was facing, it was almost a rude awakening for him and the offensive line altogether. And that's why you saw Mitch Morse kind of sliding to his side a lot. But I thought games 4, 5, and even 6 for a little bit against the Chiefs, I thought he really came on. What were your thoughts on Cody Ford's play specifically at left guard?
I think to start with it, I think he's kind of like the forgotten person in this offensive line conversation. Everyone's talking about Williams and Feliciano, and then people talk about Boettger and Winters. But I think a lot of people have forgotten that Cody Ford was a starting guard and then got hurt and was done for the majority of the year. And you put out a tremendous, I'm going to plug that. You put out a tremendous Twitter thread today of clips and highlights of Cody Ford at left guard. And I'm not just saying it, just say it. It was really insightful and really good to see even just the basic. I think people also at times think like, oh, guard's a guard. He can play left guard. He can play right guard. It's the same thing. And, oh, Greg, that's an awesome point there. Putting him between Dawkins and Morse mattered. That's the best path to maximize his value. Cody Ford went at left guard, i.e. between Deion Dawkins at left tackle and Mitch Morse at center. His first step was quicker. You could tell that he wasn't thinking as much. His punches and his hand movement was more symmetrical, and in time with his step, he was able to recover better, give Ford a chance, as Lone Wolf says there. I've been on the Cody Ford to guard train ever since he was drafted. I appreciate that he can play right tackle in a pinch, but give him to me at guard. that was one of the things that I was banging the drum for last offseason was Cody Ford to guard. And this offseason, I'm banging that same drum, but in a different beat, because now I'm Cody Ford to left guard. I think he's much more comfortable there. I think he can process better at that position. And he's got good physical tools. He's got good physical measurables. And to compare him to somebody on defense, Tremaine Edmonds, you could really see how limited his play was this past season when you could see him thinking. He was processing more in his head instead of just reading and reacting and playing. And give me that same thing on offense with Cody Ford. Put him in a position that he feels most natural at, that he feels comfortable at mentally and physically. Maximize that and take advantage of it. Cody Ford to left guard. And also to Greg's point, putting him in between two strong players in Dion Dawkins and Mitch Morse. And I know some people don't think Mitch Morse is good. And if that's the case, I'll fight you right now.
I will throw down.
I will throw down right now, digitally or physically, whatever anybody wants. Putting him at left guard, I think, is very ideal for this offensive line. He's already somebody that's coming back. He's under contract. He fits there. I think he can more than get the job done. I think that should be the left side of the offensive line coming in. Like right now, I'm ready to ink that of Dion Dawkins, Cody Ford, and Mitch Morse, and then we just have to figure out the right side of the line.
Yeah, like you said, a lot of people forget. They think that he's going to be playing right guard, because with Feliciano, unknown as far as contract goes, that, let's just slide him in there and bring Boettger back. We'll put right guard, left guard. But people forget that, again, Cody Ford played 877 snaps in 2018 at right tackle at Oklahoma, but he actually played left guard in 2017 over 300 snaps. So he's not really a right guard. His position is left guard. So when you watch some of those clips I posted, watch his feet. Watch him in his pass sets. It's so much more natural. He's not robotic in those pass sets.
It's when he was at left guard. He looks like a different player.
And even his confidence in his hands, you saw him shooting his hands independently. Now, that's also a weakness of his, but the fact that he has the confidence to do that tells you where he needs to be playing. And as being said, he's going to be one of the starting five. Where that is, we don't know. But I thought him at left guard, some of my notes from the last few days of watching him, his issues or weaknesses at guard, can be minimized at guard versus tackle. Obviously, his athleticism, his kick slide speed, that can be exposed outside at tackle. His hands and footwork are big question marks still. I mean, that is still there. I'm not trying to give everyone hope like, okay, he's a starter, but he still has some scars and marks that he needs to fix come next season. There's no doubt about it. Obviously, aside from just staying healthy, he two hands punches way too often. And if you guys don't know, when you're punching with both hands and not working independently, you're putting your entire body off balance. And it's easy for someone to just double hand swipe or swipe your hands away. You're off balance and they're by you. They have a short edge. He does that way too often. But again, if you put him at guard, it minimizes things like that. He can just work in that phone booth, as they say. And obviously he is nasty. One of the comments in the chat room from, I believe, Michael, was that he's nasty, much like Feliciano is, and partly why so many fans love John is because of his nastiness, his demeanor, and his physicality. That's something that Cody Ford, really hung his hat on in college. And I believe it was the Embedded episode when they're interviewing him. He said he would rather be tough than smart. I believe that was the interview. So that's really where his game is. And as Greg said, the final thing is when you watched him at left guard versus right guard or even right tackle, he was so much more openly communicating and just pointing guys out. Okay, that's the mic, letting Morris know, letting Dawkins know, hey, watch out. Like he was so much more involved at left guard. And I just think that confidence is a really big thing for him, for a guy that struggled early on in his career. And I think that's why he needs to be a left guard. It should be Boettger and Ford competing. Again, bring Boettger back, compete at left guard, and see who wins that. If Cody Ford can't win that competition, then we're in trouble. Then we can start talking about, what to do with him and, is he really a bust? I think it's with his injuries and the disservice that they've given him the last couple of years and bouncing him around, all of that matters. It's little by little matters in the grand scheme of developing a player. And I think the staff is as much at fault at the lack of development of Cody Ford that, as Cody Ford is the player. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. And it's, again, playing the offensive line, it's a hard thing. Even just staying in the same position grouping, going from left guard to right guard isn't the same thing. It's hard. Going from tackle to guard is hard. And Cody being, I forget who made the comment earlier in the chat here of, can't keep flip-flopping forward. That's something that's not ideal for his development. But if we're able to solidify a position for him, i.e. that left guard spot, I think it does this team a positive service. I think it does him a positive service if he can have a full off season of understanding where he's going to be, where he's going to go. And exactly to your point, I don't think putting him at left guard means like, oh my God, we got an all-pro guard on our hands. I think he can be solid and he can do the job, but he does have some issues and some deficiencies in his game. But I think putting him at guard minimizes those deficiencies. You mentioned one of them. The big reason I don't want him at right tackle is that kick step and that slide coming back. I don't think he can handle speed rushers. I don't think he has that fast twitch and that movement to get back, maintain hands in sync with his body and be able to nail down those blocks on the outside. We saw it. Granted, it's one game, and I don't like to use one game as a sample size, but we saw it in that playoff game against Houston a couple years ago. He was just getting beat around that outside, and it was uncomfortable for Josh. And I think his play style, his meanness, his nastiness, his body type, and his strengths play more to him as a guard. And just nail down one spot. We invested a high pick in him. I'm going to say anything on the first 2 days is a high pick. And I think this is his year, much to your point. This is a prove it year. Let's see what we got. If he can't beat out Ike Boettger, it's curtains. That's it. But let's lock him into a position that he's most comfortable at, that maximizes his strengths, minimizes his weaknesses, again, which is something we're going to have to do in a lot of places because we don't have financial flexibility to just be like, well, it doesn't matter. We can throw money at someone else or we can burn an early draft pick on someone else. Let's see what we got. And at this point, it seems like he should be able to get the job done, especially if, like you mentioned, we put him at left guard where he's more comfortable and more ideally suited.
Right. And so the last guy let's talk about tonight is Feliciano. We kind of talked about him a good amount, but I mean, numbers-wise, you're a salary cap guy. Numbers-wise, he's likely going to be pretty cheap, right? I mean, I think it's worth bringing him back to, maybe start initially and bring some competition, whether it's in the draft or free agency, to compete with him because you know me, I was done. I'm done with him as far as starting guard goes, but I know what he brings, and I know that Bean loves to fill gaps before he heads into free agency, before he heads in the draft. So I understand that he is a starting level guy, but you can absolutely do better at right guard than Feliciano.
Yeah, I want to preface it by saying I'm comfortable with him coming back, one, at the right price, obviously, and
not
two,
that price. Not that
no,
price.
I was going to say, I'm about to get to that, Lone Wolf. I appreciate you right there. I'm comfortable with him coming back at the right price, and I'm more comfortable with him being a depth or rotational piece, or at the very worst, or I should say like best, I guess, depending on how you're looking at it, the fifth best lineman in the group. And I'm not comfortable holistically bringing him back as a starter as of this point. And to Lone Wolf's point, as of right now, his average annual value as per Spot Track is $8.4 million, which would pay him as the 17th highest paid guard in the entire NFL. I'm not doing that on any day of the week. I don't care how we structure it. No, thank you. If he wants that and he's going to get that, then he's gone. I'm sorry. I love his attitude. I love his mentality, but the on-field production does not merit or warrant that amount of money. That being said, to what you led with in this conversation about Feliciano, I don't know if he's going to get that type of $8 million a year in this nuclear winter offseason. I don't know if somebody out there is going to commit to John Feliciano being the 17th highest paid guard in the NFL. You and I like to grind tape. Mm-hmm. People in the NFL grind tape way more than we do, and they recognize what we recognize. And if we're able to diagnose things in the run game and the pass game with John Feliciano, and even though his best trait is a run blocker, but he still struggled in certain areas and contributed to the one dimension that the Bills running game turned into in the back end of 2020, these GMs and scouts and coaches are going to see that same thing. And I don't think someone's going to commit that amount of money to John Feliciano. So if that being said, if we can get him to come back at a cheap deal, he likes the team, he likes the culture, he likes being here. I like what he brings from a leadership perspective. Yeah. I'm fine with him coming back. I would prefer it to be as a depth piece. Even if he comes back very cheap, I'm not the most comfortable plugging him in at right guard, but we could have worse options there. And especially if he comes back on a cheap deal, I can be okay with it.
Yeah, and I do think that he has to sign with the Bills. If he's going to come back, he's going to sign before like the new year, probably probably opens, right? I mean, like he's not going to be a guy that hits the market and then all these other free agents hit the market because teams are strapped against the cap where, okay, well, guess what? Now I have all these other guards on the market. I think that would kind of hurt his value. No, I mean, the market's going to be flooded with some good talent and guys that are probably better than Feliciano, I would think. I don't think he's going to get the $8 million. So I just would be surprised if he gets what he's expecting, and especially once more and more of those guys hit the market. So I think he's all right to bring back. I mean, Quentin Spain, he was like a $5 million a year AAV guy before they cut him, obviously. But I mean, that 5 would be pushing it for me. Like I said, I was mentally done with him, and that was more right after the game because I was super emotional about how he performed and the lack thereof. But I understand that Bean's going to want to fill. He doesn't want those 2 red boxes on the right side. He doesn't want the right guard open. He doesn't want right tackle open. I think he's going to try to fill at least one of them, and I would prefer that he fills right guard and then uses a higher pick on right tackle to lock in for years. But we're going to save a lot of that talk for tackles for another episode. So let's transition to what the Bills look for in traits for offensive linemen. We saw, physicality. We saw nastiness being some of the traits that, the guys look for from this regime, look for an offensive lineman. So let me ask you, Anthony, what do you think the Bills like and what they look for in traits in offensive linemen? Because we're going to look at a couple guys, there are 2 or 3 guys tonight that you're going to obviously hold some of those traits, but I think we're going to have more fun with others. And I'm talking about Dickerson because he's going to be a fun film breakdown. But what are some traits that you think they like?
I think they like guys that can block good.
That's a good start. Like McDermott says about receivers, catching it is good. Like that's where you should start.
Yep, that's where you should start. But they like guys, as you've laid out here in the notes, they like guys that are big, that are smart, that are tough, that are physical. They like guys with a bit of meanness and nastiness to them. But I think the big one to highlight, and if those of you could peek behind the fourth wall here, you would see that this last part I'm about to mention is in italics because it's very important. Something that Brandon Beane mentioned as, gotta be a wrestler. That's a very good point, Taylor. Well put, well played. Something that Beane mentioned in one of his end of the year pressers, he wants more athleticism when it comes to that offensive line. And Eric, that's something that you and I dove into big time when we looked at the glaring issues with the Bills running game. They just did not have that athleticism up front. You mentioned it when talking about Boettger, he's not fluid enough when he pulls and in his movements. And even Feliciano, for as good of a mauler as he is, when you hear a nickname like Mongo, you don't think athleticism. You think of just this guy who's going to maul people.
Yeah.
And they want that athleticism. I think we've got enough players through the past couple of years to see what Beane and McDermott are looking for in their offensive linemen, like we mentioned. And part of the prospects that we're going through tonight, part of the reason why we've chosen them is not only because they should, in theory, be there when the Bills pick at the end of the first round or even potentially on day 2, but they fit that mold of what the Bills look for in offensive linemen, whether it be big or smart or tough or physical or nasty or athletic, or in the case of Landon Dickerson, maybe kind of all those things. Yeah. And I also think they value, like we mentioned earlier, positional versatility. They like guys that, their main position is this, but if in a bind, they can flex to the other guard spot, or they're a guard, but they can flex into center a little bit. And that's another big pro for one of the guys we're going to be talking about tonight as well. I'm not going to spoil who that is. But yeah, that's a little bit of a peek into what the Bills look for in offensive linemen, and part of the reason why we've chosen these 3 prospects to go over tonight, because they fit those needs and of offensive linemen, but also fit the traits that Beane and McDermott look for.
Yeah, as someone said in the chat, they got to be a wrestler. Even a heavyweight wrestler is a good thing. So we'll start off with, the wrestler here, and that's Creed Humphrey, center from Oklahoma, a guy that a lot of people early in this draft process, especially prior to the Senior Bowl, really talked about him in the light of like, hey, he could possibly kick out the guard. I mean, I'm not too keen on that idea, especially early on in this draft process, but what did you like about Creed Humphrey? I'll bring up some of the traits that you talked about before we actually get right to the film. But what are some things you liked about Creed Humphrey?
He tremendously smart. I know it may be like cliche or the kind of the old proverbial, like, oh, he's a leader and a great like identifier up front, but he really is. He's got a high football IQ. You mentioned his snaps at center. He's had 39 games played. He's played in big games, played in big moments at Oklahoma, and then he's got a high football IQ. He's smart and he's heady. His processing and assignment identification, we've got some clips that we're going to show of him just identifying fronts and calling things out. A fun little tidbit in talking about Creed Humphrey, which is a really big pro for him. I remember this when Kyler Murray came out, people were talking about how Kaiir would process NFL defenses because he didn't necessarily have to do a lot of pre-snap adjustments and reads at Oklahoma because Creed Humphrey would call out every single thing and identify the mic and identify the front and what was going on. He is left-handed. Very good call, Ron, which is a very rare thing for a center. And when you're talking about Creed Humphrey, you're thinking about the head and the mentals that he brings, and he's fundamentally sound. He's got good technique. He is a former wrestler. He's got good balance. He communicates well with his teammates. He's a smart guy. He does have some limits in terms of his range and his athleticism, and he can be caught reaching. There's that clip of him just getting completely swam through by Quinnen Williams a couple years ago because he does what you were talking about with when it comes to Cody Ford with that two-hand punch, and he comes in and Williams clears both hands with one swipe and just swims right over him. And he does have some deficiencies and the weaknesses in that aspect. He has struggled against NFL caliber competition, and he does rely a lot on his upper body to generate leverage, which isn't necessarily a weakness, but he more steers defenders than he does clears holes and impact blocks. And also, you mentioned it, I think a big one, we talked about that positional versatility. If we're talking about Creed Humphrey as a center, I like it and I'm fine with it. I don't think people, especially again in this time where we need sure things coming into this offseason, taking a guy and thinking, oh, well, look at his body type. He can easily slot into guard. That's a big assumption to assume that you can take a guy like Creed Humphrey, who's really only seen meaningful snaps at center. I know he took some Senior Bowl snaps at guard and fared well, but it's a big ask to just assume that we can take him and then plot him into being a starting guard in the NFL right away in his rookie year.
Yeah, and I'll just add, because you covered some good points there, I'll just add that, he's very disciplined, and especially when you talk about zone blocking, he's very good at it, very technically sound. He's more of a positional leverage guy. He's not a guy that's going to overwhelm a defensive lineman. He's not going to physically outman him and drive him off the line. He's going to use position. He's going to use angles. He's very good off the snap, obviously, at center, very quick. Very good at jump or hooking on reach blocks to seal that place out alley for the running back, making that read for the running back way easier. And our national scout, Russ Brown, if you're not following him on Twitter, make sure to follow him at Russ NFL Draft. He added that the Humphrey seems destined to play well in his own scheme. I totally agree with that. His anchor can be late, but he hasn't allowed a sack in 2 years. So that's pretty wild. And, he plays in a scheme that, obviously Cody Ford played at, and it's a scheme that a lot of people use that as a negative. Why? Because it's amazing scheme, first of all, under Lincoln Riley. And it's a scheme that, and they play in a conference that sees some odd type defenses where a lot of times, there are guys that are just uncovered as offensive linemen. A lot of, odd fronts, only 3 down linemen. That fourth guy's coming from depth. So that is at times used against him as far as weaknesses go. And his play strength to me is probably the biggest thing that I worry about with him. When he played that upper echelon of players on the defensive line, there were times where he was just straight bullied, and he was having trouble anchoring versus them. You talked about Quinnen Williams and that swim move and that hump move. Like he was getting by him in a big game. So I think that is something absolutely to pay attention to. So now let's get into some of the film here, because we're going to highlight a couple plays from him, and there are plays that really show, again, his, I would say his IQ, his processing, and how he, is really the number one communicator here. So I want you to watch this guard right here, and then this tackle right there. I want you to watch those two guys and what they're doing, what their hand signals are. You see them pointing out and letting their adjacent offensive linemen know who's blocking who to look out for. And so then watch Creed Humphrey. He brings them all together. He's coordinating this offensive line. They're running the ball here, and he's making sure. So you'll see initially the guard, he'll point out, hey, they're working this guy to that guy, and then this guy saying, hey, I'm going to block him, but you guys need to work to this backside guy right here. So it's Creed Humphrey that brings them together. Each side is coordinating and saying, hey, this is who we need to work to. But it's Creed that says, okay, no, I'm putting everyone on the same page. This is who we need to work to. And then you see the ball get into the end zone here. And he does this on every play. Here you see him identifying the mic. Okay, 30 is the mic here. So now, once the ball snap, you're going to see everyone execute their play. And so this side of line is responsible for these three guys. So he puts them on the same page, and they execute a little stunt. And look at it. It's picked up perfectly, and the pass is completed from Jalen Hurts to the wide receiver. And as you said, when Murray was there, it was Humphrey that was identifying the mics. It was Humphrey setting the protection, just like Hurts this season.
Yeah, his pre-snap identification is really strong, and if you're not aligned on what's going to happen when the defensive linemen stunt and do things like that, it's easy to leave a gap wide open. You get a free rusher, and Humphrey's identification here, and then it hit, and as you can see right here, all three defenders are occupied and called for. And then look at as the defense there goes into that stunt, because the offensive line is properly aligned due to Humphrey's call out at the beginning, they switch very easily. They pass everything off, create a nice passing window for Hurts to just fire it right downfield. That's a beautiful lane. And that's due to the identification of Creed Humphrey pre-snap that allows them to be in the proper execution post-snap and make that play happen.
Yeah, and here's another play in the run game. So you're going to see both the right guard and right tackle pull. And Creed Humphrey, obviously, it's a gap type scheme. So you have a down block here. Well, watch what that defensive tackle does. He runs wide because they're running a stunt. They want Humphrey to chase him so that this guy can fold over the top and disrupt the running lane here. But watch Humphrey. He does not chase this guy up the field. What he does is he just passes him on, and then he climbs to this guy right here. And then there's a slight little lane right up the middle for the running back, and that's sealed off, and they're into the second and third level. That's just great identification by him and processing post-snap.
Yeah, again, one of the highlights that we talked about with his strength is his intelligence, his football IQ, and being a smart, heady player. And that's an example of it right there. Him identifying like, okay, this guy has looped so wide and gone so far upfield. I don't need to worry about him. I see this outside defender flashing back inside. Let me protect the integrity of this running lane and get myself in position. Now, here's a little bit when we talk about some of the weaknesses. Nice hole, like the block, and his ability to hold and stalemate the defender a bit, but he does get pushed into this hole. Yes. He's a bit too upright, and he more catches the defender than he does attack and make the impact. And you'd like to see him get a little lower and be more of an anchor point at the position of attack rather than
take the fight to him. I mean, take the fight to him,
rather like than just, he gets blown back and he stalemates a little too much. Take the fight, get low, smash him out of that hole and keep it wide. The running back gets through quickly, but Humphrey almost gets pushed right back into the running back. And this is something we talked about before we went live, is like, we like Humphrey. He executes a lot of these down blocks, and he does a great job of, not chasing that defensive tackle. But where we would like to see him improve is taking that fight to him. He executed these down blocks a lot in this offense, a lot of the gap scheme from shotgun. And a lot of times you just saw him do this. You just saw him take positional leverage and just really try to wall the guy off, when this defender does a good job of constricting that lane. He does his job for that, for all intents and purposes, does a good job there. But Humphrey is able to wall him off just enough, and that running back gets to the next level. It's something that you see a lot from. You see him processing the threat. So here he is pulling on this pass right here. He's pulling out wide, does a decent job of getting out in the space, and you're going to see a rusher from inside right here start to loop inside right here, and you see the running back slide over, and Humphrey's helping out the tight end, I believe, out to the left side. But you see the threat. Okay, now the new threat's coming. He goes ahead and seals that off. So that's a good job of processing the nearest threat and just, playing above the scheme. His plan was initially to go out wide to help the tight end, but he sees that there's a linebacker running free, basically, because running back is not in position. So he does what he can to get in front of him, and the ball is able to be delivered. Yeah, so much of this game is reading and reacting. It would be awesome if everything happened the way it was drawn up. And this one is a good one. Humphrey knows what his initial assignment is going to be, but he sees the position the tight end has and then keeps his head on a swivel, takes a peek back inside, sees the color flash, and then peels off to protect his quarterback from the inside and give the running back a bit of support. Again, another smart, heady play does what he can, and it's another example of his high football IQ being used to his benefit and the benefit of the offense.
Yeah, and here's another one. This is against TCU. This is a final play, just kind of highlighting his mental awareness and his football IQ. So again, at center, and you see them, they're running a QB draw, and prior to the snap, you're gonna watch right as I let it roll right here. Watch this guy right here, 32. You're gonna see him fold over the top. Now this is a QB draw, so basically you're gonna see this, and then of course the Bills run this type of play, QB draw with Hurts here. But watch Humphrey. Watch him not chase that defensive tackle. Watch him slide to the next level as that guy's folding over, number 32. He gets his positional leverage on him, rides him all the way to the end zone. That is good processing. Again, post-snap, assessing the threat, recognizing the stunt, the run stunt to really stop this play. If he doesn't get in the way of this edge player right here, there's a good chance that guy makes a play on the ball.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. He kind of knows what's coming based on the alignment of the defense combined with the play call pre-snap. He adjusts post-snap, sees 32, flashback inside, knows he's a threat. I love how he's got his eyes locked on him right away. Oh, yeah. Thank you for the support. These donations and everything in the positive comments, it does a lot for us. So thank you so much for that. And man, the positive comments always distract me.
Yeah, it's awesome, man.
My heart always gets so warm. And you see Humphrey adjust, and then he just washes his man right over. He does let someone else made a comment in the chat earlier about Humphrey. Lateral. 32 gets into Humphrey a little too much into his chest, more than I would like. I would like to see.
This is what we said. He plays upright a little, right? I mean, look at the pad level.
Yeah, he's high, and 32 he gets underneath him, starts to long arm him a bit. I would like to see Humphrey get better hand placement and have the strength to more engage and lock out and control the defender rather than he does block him here. He washes him out and he gets better control at the end. But like you said, he uses more positional leverage to kind of ride the defender and shepherd the defender out. You and I talked about it offline before the episode started, especially in comparison to when we start talking about Landon Dickerson. Creed Humphrey, again, solid technique, smart, heady player. His blocks, when he is successful, he more turns his defender or rides his momentum with them and uses, exactly like you coined that phrase, that positional leverage. He uses that much more than he does just blowing somebody up or moving them himself. And that's not always sustainable on the NFL level, especially when you're coming up against one, professional dudes, two, with professional defensive lineman size. That's a hard thing to do.
So Taylor's asking, if Humphrey can't play guard, do we take him off our board? More seems too important to replace with a rookie in the Super Bowl run. I worry. It's hard for me to project Humphrey as a guard because I haven't seen him do it. And, as we're going off film. So maybe he had reps in college in practice at guard. He got some looks at the Senior Bowl at guard. I think he's a solid player, but I think I went into this film breakdown with higher expectations for Humphrey than when I finished watching him. So I don't know how you feel about that, Anthony. I feel like he's more of a day two guy and more towards the end of day two.
Exactly to your point. You never know. Maybe he's had some reps at guard in practice. I'd be wary of just completely casting him off because he is a smart guy and he does have some good fundamentals and some good technique. I am very comfortable with him towards the back end of day two, given the value and given the traits that he has and how he can plug in. I do worry. I do worry just with how I've seen some things with him, and especially that like lateral movement and how he can get with things. I do worry how his play would transition to guard. Right. And that's the only thing that gives me cause for concern. But I don't think the lack of meaningful snaps there is enough for me to just completely cast him off of our draft board and be like undraftable. No, I wouldn't go that far.
All right. So, we had some good reps from Humphrey and, more reps from the shoulders up. And that's what you need in a center at the next level. So that's something we really liked with him. But let's get into a guy that I think we're both kind of crushing on and really the highlight of this breakdown. And that is Landon Dickerson. So let's hear what you thought about Landon Dickerson after watching his film this week.
I'm in love. He's someone who you see Alabama on TV a lot. And so I knew the name. I'd seen him a lot on broadcast tape. And then obviously the injury that he had and how Nick Saban brings him on in the national championship to get a snap. And you just hear all this positive all this positivity and all these positive comments about the type of person he is and the leader that he is. And then you go and you watch the All-22 and you watch the film, and it was really, really exciting to watch Landon Dickerson here. And his positional versatility, I know it's towards the bottom there of his strengths. That was something that I really liked. He had meaningful snaps at center, but also at guard, and not just at right guard or left guard, both left guard and right guard. He's seen that time at Alabama. And when you watch him, as some of these clips are going to show, he's a punishing blocker. He's strong at the point of attack. He keeps his head on a swivel. There's so many times in the tape where defensive lines try to use stunts against Alabama, and he just kicks one guy out, sees the flash of color, reshifts his feet, brings his body with him, and then catches up and reestablishes himself, resets, and refits. It's a really nice job by Dickerson in so much of this film, just combining his size with the power and the meanness. The one weakness, and I've mentioned it twice, that I really do have with him, he's coming off a season-ending knee injury that he suffered again that I mentioned in December of 2020, but he's had some significant ones throughout his career in terms of his injury history. He had a torn ACL in 2016. He had ankle surgery in 2017, another ankle injury in 2018. He's a very large man. He's 6'6", 326, but he doesn't play huge because he has tremendous pad level, which I know is your favorite thing about him. He's got elite pad level, as you are going to mention and get into. So he doesn't play that huge. He doesn't play upright. He plays with good pad level. But to see a big man who plays a very physical and punishing style have that amount and significance of injuries to his lower body does give me some cause for concern. But I mean, his tape is just so fun.
Yeah, I mean, big man. That's understatement. 6'6", 325 pounds. Again, that pad level is super important for a guy at that size, and a lot of teams will shy away from drafting a guy to play center or even guard for that matter at that size. That's tackle level size and length. And so, where he plays at the next level, it could be center, it could be guard. I think for the Bills' sake, having that flexibility is incredibly important. Yes. And I mean, he was the top guard out of high school. He played in a wing T offense, which has a lot of, pulls for the guards. And there was one article that I read that the opposing defense had a plan to limit him and not let him get in the space by just cutting him. And by the third time they tried it on him, his teammate said that Dickerson just literally picked the guy up and suplexed him. Like the quote was, "It looked like old professional wrestling." And so he got thrown out of the game. So that's the type of player that Landon Dickerson is. That's why teams are going to fall in love with him. That's why the Bills will fall in love with him. They love those nasty and physical players like him. I think he's a punisher. He's a finisher. When he pulls, especially in the screen game, when he gets out into space, there's just bodies flying everywhere. I mean, it's just like a dropping like flies. And it's every time I watch his film, and you're going to see some of this hit reel, this hit tape on Landon Dickerson. It's almost like I hear, "Let the bodies hit the floor." Like it's just a little drowning pool. Yeah, I literally just put that on for the next 20 minutes when we're breaking down this film, because that's what we're gonna be breaking down. But long arms, he can disrupt linebackers at the second level. Sometimes he's not gonna get and lock on to that linebacker as that linebacker is scraping down the line of scrimmage or at the second level. But what he can do is use his long arms to push that guy and get a piece of him. And that guy goes flying, as you'll see in at least one of the clips that we're going to look at. And I just like he's like a power forward. He just likes to play in that paint, kind of back guys down. And it's just so much fun to watch. As you said, man, it's just really fun to watch because he's the type of player that, you put on his film and you see what he can do and you're like, okay, I want to watch that every Sunday, right? Like, he's the kind of guy that coaches just love. And so here's a play. We're going to start with him at left guard. And you just see him find work. Again, this is a hit reel, guys. So you're going to enjoy this. This is him really just taking guys out in different fashions. So left guard here, watch him find work. He has really no one on him as that defensive tackle goes inside. So watch number 13 out wide here. And watch him go clean him up. Just co-cocks him, drops him to the turf, and allows. And that's important in a sense because that edge player, although he's getting mauled here, you see hair is kind of leaking out here, and Jones is just going to swing it out to him. So getting that guy down, not just not allowing him to jump up, in a sense. Really just helps that swing pass, get completed to Harris right there. I mean, and then you saw Harris, as we broke down last week. He does what he does well. So now watch this one. You see a loop. You see the defensive tackle rush upfield. You see number 0, the edge rusher in a 2-point. He'll loop back inside. That's a mistake with Dickerson at center, right?
Oh, this is one of the things I mentioned earlier, keeping the head on a swivel. He doesn't get too wide. He maintains his spot, and he sees the stunt coming through and then just lowers himself. It's the opposite of I don't like comparing players too much, but what we saw with the Creed Humphrey tape with some of the clips we showed, Creed Humphrey he catches defenders and he's more upright in his position. That's not what happens here. Dickerson sees the stunting defensive lineman coming across his face. He gets lower and he attacks and he initiates the contact and just lowers, lines up face mask on face mask, extends his arms and just puts him to the ground. Oh, and then he
talks shit too.
Just look at it.
He'll do this all the time. He'll put someone on their ass and then he'll just get right up in their face like, oh yeah, you like that?
Oh, don't ever stunt back inside ever again. Oh, just beautiful.
And that's a good point, because when you do that early in the game, that guy is not going to want to stunt again inside like that. Those defensive ends they're not going to be full throttle when they're looping back inside. Like on this play, watch him now. Instead of hitting the edge rusher right here, he gets this guy who goes inside first. So you see him dive inside first right here. And then this is the looper. So he hits the penetrator this time, not the looper. Now watch him take him out. Boom, puts him on his ass. And then guess what? I'm coming down for you like an old wrestling movie. I mean, that's just what you get from Dickerson on each and every play. Don't come inside. Yeah. Just don't do it.
No, just don't. And that technique is important and intelligence is important. But there's just some aspect of toughness and meanness and nastiness, not even just because the Bills like it in their offensive linemen, like we mentioned, but it just adds an extra something to the offensive line and to the mentality. And exactly like Ron's comment there, he just blasts defenders, and his build, he does have a super wide build. He's a big dude. Again, 6'6", 326 pounds. Eric, you were mentioning it offline. That's big for tackles. As a reference, Deion Dawkins is 6'5", I believe 320 pounds. So he's an inch taller and 6 pounds heavier. He is a very, very large man. And while his athleticism is somewhat limited by that size and by injury, he's physical and he's athletic enough and is fluid enough and flexible enough to really just body guys and get enough movement that he can recognize and make plays happen.
Yeah, don't spin back inside, whether you're rushing upfield and trying to spin back inside. You see him take number 92 and just drive him into the ground, just lifts him up, basically, drops him like a bad habit. Like, that's what is on. Literally, he does this like 2 or 3 times a game, and that's why we're kind of showing it. So I was talking about his length and his ability to scoop to the next level, and sometimes he's just not going to be able to get and cover up guys like this, like he does here, though. Like, you see him fold over 55, and that linebacker kind of stumbles a little bit, gets caught up in traffic, but watch Dickerson finish him off. Boom. Like, he is just waiting to run someone over. He doesn't care if that guy's stumbling. He's going to just finish him off and watch him after the play here. Watch him right here. I'm going to highlight him. Watch him right here. Okay, this guy's on the ground. He's on his ass, right? Now watch him. I'm just going to stand up over the top of you. Yeah, it was me. It was me. Hey, look at me. It was me. I did this to you. Remember that.
I want you to know.
Yeah. I'm waiting. Look up. That truck that just hit you was me. You see it all the time. So now here's a screenplay. You're going to see 0 mug to A gap. You're going to see him drop out. So watch Dickerson. He obviously, is coming out into the open field on the screen. God. So here it comes. Here comes the pain, right here. Here comes the pain. Here it is. Bong, like bye-bye. Like, he's just looking to punish people on every single play, whether it's in the run game or the screen game.
It's nice to see him be able to get out and make plays here, because as we did mention, sometimes his range and his targeting in getting to the second level, i.e. the linebackers in the secondary, is somewhat of a concern. And sometimes he struggles to get leverage on scraping linebackers and get above, but again, it's not too much of a liability to just knock him out as a prospect. And that one was a really great example. Him just being able to get out in front and put a guy on the turf, not just who is in his immediate proximity, but he's able to climb and make a play. And here's another one. We get a screen from Alabama, and Dickerson comes out in front and leads the charge and just
Oh my goodness, this is against Georgia too. You see him get out into space and then watch him just run right through this guy like he's never even there, like he wasn't
And he
standing at
knocks
the
him
50-yard line.
he knocks him into the defender who's coming behind him, trying to scrape over and take the angle to the screen, and basically takes out two. And that's the thing, if he can get there and gets to his man, he's gonna finish his block. And it's so not encouraging. I mean, it is so encouraging to see that and just see him just keep putting guys on the ground play after play. And this one hurt my heart a little bit because it's him against a huge favorite of ours, Tyler Shelvin from LSU. Yep. But again, we love Shelvin and what he's able to do. And look how Dickerson meets him with that physicality, turns him, maintains his leverage, fights off that long arm from Shelvin, maintains his hand positioning, and is still able enough to keep that hole wide enough for Najee Harris to get through.
Yeah, we talked about his size and why that pad level is so important. Look at his pad level. And Shelvin is another guy that plays with really good pad level. Look at that reach block by him. Look at the strong play side hand, that left hand right there. Look at him swing his hips through. And then that strength, that lower body strength, and that overall strength from him is super important on this play versus a guy like Shelvin, and does a good job. I think it's a good rep by both of them because you see Shelvin kind of constricting that lane right there. But it's really a really good snap by Dickerson too, especially when you watch it in real time. Look how quick and low he is off the snap. Just a really nice snap by both those guys. But it shows you that even a big guy like Dickerson can do that. And you see him at right guard right here, backside cutoff. He's right here, backside cutoff on this split zone type play, and does a good job of working his zone track, and then waiting for that guy to show into his gap, and then he seals him off. Again, strong play side, and he's able to hold that backside off so that Harris can get to the next level. Again, here, now watch him work in tandem with the right guard here. Good. Again, his zone technique is really good. That's why I like him if the Bills want to continue with these, zone run concepts. Look at him. His partner work through that near shoulder. They're taught to rip through this near shoulder, get that guy turn so that Dickerson can come around and seal the alley. Good work between those two. And then look, it's just easy for Dickerson once he's able to get the leverage there because he's so big.
We saw so many misses when we went through the Bills running game in 2020 of just not being able to seal, whether it was inside, whether it was in gap, whether it was zone, just not being able to seal the edge and seal alleys and lanes for the running backs. And I love everything you said. I love the movement here and that turn, that athleticism and his ability, much like he did a little bit against Shelvin, his ability to make contact and then swing the hips, and then he locks in. He doesn't get driven back. He doesn't let the defender shrink the hole at all. He maintains his positioning, maintains body control, and then widens that alley and solidifies it so that the running back can get through. It's another strong rep from him.
Yeah, he's fun to watch. So, I mean, it's something that, he's a guy that, yes, he's big, but watch him here. Look at the snap. Okay, look how quick he is. He snaps it and look at it. The ball's not even to Mac Jones yet, and he's already basically into his second step right here. He's by that nose tackle, and that's super important when you want your center or guards for that matter to scoop to the next level. Look at the angle that he takes to the backside. Linebacker number 10. This is a good job of working through traffic and doing what he can to kind of get a piece of that guy to cut off that backside pursuit. Another good run for the Tide here.
Yeah, him getting to the second level and having to be rangier isn't necessarily his strong suit, but he is athletic enough to get it done, get in front of his guy. And we mentioned it. It's one of his weaknesses sometimes, getting that range and getting to that second level. But he does a good job here, gets a piece of his man, gets in the way, obstructs him, reroutes him. And what's a key thing too, again, for a very large human that he is, his ability to continue to bring his feet. He doesn't stop. He doesn't just look for the one contact and that's it. He moves his feet. He initiates the contact, but then brings his feet with him. And that's huge for a guy that size. It just makes him that harder to get away from and that much harder to disengage if you're the defender.
Yeah, so this is, again, that length at the second level. Again, maybe that linebacker is scraping too fast. He's not going to really get a piece of him. But on these zone type runs or these pin and pull runs like you have here, that's kind of like a crack toss because they have a down block at the point of attack and a tackle pulling. But watch the length. He's not going to get there per se. Well, guess what? He's going to throw him out of the way so that, he can create a lane for the running back. That length is super important. Now, again, watch his quickness. He's at center here. Look at his quickness off the snap. This is in the goal at the goal line too. Think about what those guys are doing on the defensive side of the ball. They're trying to just cut the legs out from underneath these offensive linemen. He sideswipes it, and watch him get to the second level to number 28 right here. Again, using that length, clears him right out. Harris walks in for the touchdown. Just a beautiful play in short area, in a condensed area of the field.
Yeah, this is his bread and butter and his strong point. Meanness, nastiness around the goal line. Use that big body and that frame to just ID his man. And here he doesn't completely punish him, but he just shoves him right out of the way, widens the hole so Harris can score the touchdown. And it's just another fundamentally sound play from Dickerson. What I like too in the clip that we just looked at of him getting to the second level against the linebacker and chucking him out. You and I talked a lot about the light boxes that the Bills saw in 2020 and how we weren't able to take advantage of them. And when you have those light boxes, just in terms of number, but also in terms of the people that and the personnel that defenses are using against the Bills, they're going nickel or also going dime in some aspects. To have a guy that can get to the second level, and then all he needs to do is get a hand on a nickel corner or a nickel safety or a big nickel or whatever, and just be able to body him and put him to the ground. That's a big thing for what the Bills are trying to do and what they need to do to evolve as an offense in 2021.
Yeah, so I mean, he's a guy that we had high expectations for coming in, and after this breakdown, where do you think he goes? Obviously, he's probably likely a fit for the Bills and someone that they are targeting. Obviously, medicals aren't something we evaluate, but the Bills and their staff will. Where do you think he goes? Day 1, day 2, day 3? Where do you have him slotted?
The medicals are going to be a big one. I think if he clears enough and medically shows up well enough, I think he could easily be a first rounder towards the back end of the first round. I don't think he's going to creep in to the top 20, but somewhere around the 25 to 32 mark, I could see him creeping up depending on his medicals. I don't think he gets past the end of round 3. He's a quality prospect. He's got a good head on his shoulders. Everybody at Bama loves him, not just the players, but the coaching staff as well. When you've got a guy who, whether it's his playing ability or his personality, when you've got a guy like that Nick Saban goes out of his way to like do something nice for, like Saban did in that national championship game.
Yeah. Let him take snaps in it. Yeah.
Yep. You've got something really special on your hands, and add in the quality that he has on the field. I don't think he gets out of round 3. I don't think he gets out of day 2 at all. The medical is going to be a big one. I see round 2 as like the median, but he could go anywhere from the back end of round 1 to, I'd say, early round 3.
That's exactly where I have him. He's a fringe day 1 guy, end of round 1 to, probably if you want to do the median, he probably is a second round, early second round grade. So again, medicals and the evals are going to play a big part in that. So I think he's obviously a hell of a talent and a guy that could play multiple positions. And I think he would fit right in with the Bills. And again, Ike Boettger is 6'6". So we talked about, how big Dickerson is, but Dickerson has that size. He has that thickness, and he played in a scheme that is very similar to what the Bills are going to run. And Bobby Johnson obviously loves those big, nasty players. I think they will fall in love with him, much like they did Cody Ford. So I think he's a guy that fits the Bills scheme, and a guy that, that we're going to take a look at next. Wyatt Davis from Ohio State is another guy that we believe kind of fits the Bills scheme, and a guy that played true right guard. And some of my notes on him were he had like a hidden fluidity and athleticism to his game. And what I mean by that is, like, sometimes he didn't really flash it on every single play, but then you'd see some plays in pass protection or in the run game where you just saw him like, whoa, where did that come from? Where did that footwork come from? So it's almost like it's hidden, but it's there, and when he needs it, he can use it. But there's also a dash of nasty to his game where you'd see him, see a linebacker would be coming from depth, and he would pick him up fine. And then at the end of the play, he would send a message by just throwing the guy, across the ring. Like, he had not as many plays as Dickerson. It wasn't like a hit reel like you just saw, but he had plays like that. Some other things, I don't think he's overly violent, but as I said, he will send a message. His quickness to reach and seal on those zone running schemes, it was money for him. Able to either widen the hole by feed blocking the guy to his adjacent lineman, but he had really good footwork to do that. But he also could, on inside zone, he could team up with his partner and create some displacement in the inside zone run game. I thought he processed run stunts and blitzes very quickly. Much like Humphrey, kind of found that next threat if his guy, looped out of the picture. Very good hand placement, strong hand placement. And one of my notes was he was more of like a forklift style run blocker. And what I mean by that is he gets his hands in place and he would just elevate his center of gravity and lift the guy up so that he could not leverage him and could not get under him and drive him into the backfield. Widen that pass blocker. He kind of snags guys when they're on looping. When they're looping inside, he'll just snag them and then just use his athleticism to ride them wide. But what were some things that stood out to you, not just his strengths, but some of his weaknesses as well?
I think with his weaknesses, his narrow base at times, you've got it up there, and how he plays with that narrow base and sometimes has too much weight on his toes. He can be thrown off balance at times. And when playing against more bigger or physical, granted, Christian Barmore from Alabama is a tremendous player, but that was tape that I really was grinding through to see how he matched up against Bama, how he matched up against Barmore. And there was times when he was getting long armed by Barmore and that narrow base was catching him and he was getting thrown off balance and chucked a little bit. And the other big one, again, you got it right up there on the board, the upright times when he goes into that pass pro, that scares me. You'll see times he's able to stalemate and keep his defender from pushing him back too much, but it almost seems as if like his back is about to break because he's really getting out leveraged, but he's able to do just enough to hold his block. I would like to see him be more consistent in his lower pad level, especially given how agile he is and how quick he is, which is my favorite aspect. Looking at him, especially knowing the Bills' need at right guard and how he fits that right guard aspect, combined with the athleticism that he brings, which we also know that Bean and company want. I would like him to be able to bring that low pad level and change that base a bit to be more consistent, but he's a quality prospect and somebody that deserves a look at the end of the first round. Yeah,
my main takeaway as far as weaknesses go with him is, there are times where like he's taught obviously the flipper technique or a hook technique, and that is like, okay, when you're running zone runs, sometimes you're not going to be taught to use your hands to drive the guy. What you're going to try to do is just use your surface area, your forearm, kind of push him and plow him out of the way. You see Cody Ford do it a lot. He'll use that like flipper technique, or what he'll do is he'll just somehow hook the guy. So the guy puts his arm out and to stack and shed, he'll hook him and then run because he'll use that athleticism to run. And in zone runs, especially outside zone, that's a good technique because you obviously are hooking the guy and you're making him run. You're making him be out of his gap, or you're making the backside gap behind him widen. And so that makes the cut easier for him. So he does that a little too much, especially at the second level, when I'd like to just see him latch on and drive the guy out. Sometimes he'll go to use his forearm at the second level. It's like, dude, you're not going to be able to steer or control that guy or push him where you want him to go. So I want to see him use his hands more. And that was my biggest takeaway with him. But we'll see some really nice blocks by him, especially in zone runs. You see him reach 97 here. What you're going to see is a gap exchange between the defensive end and the linebacker. So the defensive end shoots inside right there. You see the right guard, Wyatt Davis, swing his hips through, seal him off. Nice hand placement. You see him just seal that alley off for the running back, and he's able to cut up inside of that. Just that, you see that from him routinely and consistently. Just great placement, great quickness off the snap, good processing of this gap exchange by Wyatt Davis.
Yeah, this is a really good highlight to start off with and see, and just him being able to leverage the defender and seal that off, and the hand placement is good off the bat. He maintains his base. He starts to get turned a little bit, but at that point, the running back has already gone outside, and that initial first step on this clip is what gets me. You highlighted it right off the bat, that hidden fluidity and balance. Look how quick and how smooth. Yeah. Once he starts to make contact, he turns right. It's really well done. He turns, gets position, and he's good. That's a very athletic play for a guard, and it highlights that fluidity and balance that he operates with, and it's a nice athletic piece to add to an offensive line.
Yeah, so you add in the quickness off the snap. Now watch, again, you saw his hip swing through, but watch his hand placement. You see his hand right here initially, but he does work that to the shoulder pad, and then watch the inside hand. Boom. So now he's got the guy sealed off where he can't shoot upfield right here, and then he's got this hand in place so that he can't go right through him. So Like, that is really good hand placement, good quickness off the snap, and you see that from him all the time. It's just good stuff from him. Here's a game against Clemson where you see him do a similar thing. Look at him work to the play side number and play side armpit of number 7 there, do just enough to get Dobbins there on the edge, and then Dobbins off to the races. Like, this is his film, rep in and rep out. That is what you get from Wyatt Davis.
Yeah, and this one isn't as holistically clean as the first clip, but like you said, he does just enough just to obstruct his man. And ironically, that if you leave it right there, he does the same thing with that initial block. He's got that inside hand on the back of the shoulder pad, much like he did in that previous clip, but then he quickly readjusts, gets his hands inside to allow himself to have more control over the blocker. And at that point, Dobbins has already gotten around the corner and is up and through. And it's again, not everything works out the way you draw it up. And sometimes you go to reach and some guy moves at the last minute or your technique isn't perfect. But do you get lazy and leave your hands there or hold or not bring your feet? How do you adjust? And that's a good play of it wasn't perfect, but his athleticism combined with his adjustment allows him to make a quality block and set his running back off to the races.
I appreciate it, Dwayne. His comment is, what I worry about Davis is with bad leverage technique comes holding calls at the NFL level. Most of the stuff you have said is right on. Nice show. We appreciate it, Dwayne. And, you've been in the chat room, keeping it going, keeping guys on their toes, especially me. I like that his hand placement is pretty consistent. I do think he does play upright. And even some of these plays you see, he's a little too upright. And if you go back and look at some of the clips I posted on Cody Ford, one of my critiques of him was like, okay, he had good footwork. He got his hips in position. He swung around, but he's too upright and he can lose leverage. I agree that can lead to issues at the next level. I just didn't see it at the collegiate level all that often with him. And I liked his hand placement. If you could play with good hand placement and good leverage and get to the play side number, especially on these zone runs, I like his chances in the scheme altogether. So you see him again work inside here. And this is, you see me diagram this. This is a little stunt to get the linebacker here. I forget his name. He went to the Raiders last year. Remember his name? 19.
It's not Boettger. I don't remember.
He was a guy that the Bills fans wanted to play Matt Milano in like a big nickel play here. But either way, so you see the little exchange at the line of scrimmage. 44 is going here. You're having this guy take this gap so that he can come down and fill and disrupt the play. But watch the adjustment by Wyatt Davis right here. Watch him on the snap. Watch him torque and turn that hole right there. He just opens it up. He crowbars that hole open for the running back, turns him. I mean, look at the leverage. That's that hip and core strength that I talked about when we were talking about some of his strengths. That right there is just beautiful run blocking by Wyatt Davis.
Yeah, that's the hip and core strength is really on display here. You hit the nail on the head. He starts to get long-armed a bit as if the defender is going to outposition him, and then he just rides that leverage and is like, okay, I'm still low enough. Let me exactly crowbar you, turn you, and just use what you've started to do against you and widen the hole. I love how he just flips it in the span of a second. It looks like right there at contact, you're like, uh-oh, is he getting like jacked up? His neck is all the way back. 44's got him in that AJ Epinesa long arm. And you're like, what's going to happen here? And then Wyatt's like, nope, I'm just going to crowbar him, turn him. And next thing 44 knows is he's looking on the ground. And then look at the finish. The finish is good too. Like Davis sticks with it and gets a little nasty at the end. And
he does.
Pushes him through. It's a good finish.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's a little dash of nastiness there, and it's something you see on his film from time to time. But we talked about Humphrey, his post-snap processing. Watch this play by Wyatt Davis right here. You're going to see number 90 to the right side of the screen. You're going to see him dive into the A-gap. You see Wyatt Davis just come over. And initially, they're all working pretty much zone concept to this way, zone footwork. And so really, he's just waiting for someone to show into that gap. And that guy executes that back exchange right here because they're slanting inside to send a guy off the edge. And he's aware of it. And he just completely clears him out. And again, look at his hand leverage right there. You see him right there, get his hand right on the left shoulder. And then he just uses his leverage and physicality to just drive that guy right out of the hole.
Yeah, that's what you like to see. We mentioned it earlier when talking about Creed Humphrey. You want to see someone who can open up the hole and open up the lane and widen the lane for your running back. And he creates a huge gaping hole on this play. He just comes right down, gets low, good hand placement, and the defender's caught sideways. He can't do anything to reestablish his position. Wyatt Davis continues to drive his feet, use that leverage, and takes his man completely out of the play. Again, opening up the hole, widening the hole, and something, again, to compare to the 2020 Bills, we didn't see that an awful lot in. Yeah, but Tanner Muse, Liam, was number 19.
Yeah, that was him. That was him.
You pointed Tanner Muse? Oh, I thought you were pointing to 43. Yeah, Tanner Muse. Oh, yeah, he went in like the 5th to Oakland. I kept picking him in like every mock draft I could in like round 6. Yeah, my fault. I thought you were pointing to 43. Yeah, we didn't see that a lot in 2020, where the Bills' offensive line was creating holes or opening holes for Singletary and Moss. So to be able to see Wyatt Davis pull off something like that is a very encouraging thing.
Yeah, and here's another play where you're going to see the defensive tackle. He's aligned to outside shoulder Davis, but he's going to dive back inside. But watch Davis post snap. Look at him. Boom. I'm going to take you out. Okay, you want to slant inside? I'm going to take you where you want to go. You see him just ride him wide. Again, hand placement strong there. Just rides him outside of the play. I mean, there are just several plays like this where he's reading post snap, where he just takes the guy out. Here comes a linebacker from the opposite side of the formation. He comes down because the defensive tackle that was aligned over him right there, you see him exit this way. And so what does Davis do? He moves to the next threat and wipes out the linebacker right there and is able to cover him up. And the running back is able to read that perfectly, and they get into the third level.
I like this one too, because again, that post-snap read, you hit it on the head. I like watching him come from the snap of the ball and take his initial step and like, oh, okay, assignment's changed. Then you see him ID the linebacker. He changes his footwork, resets, chops a little to get himself in position, then resets, gets low, fits, keeps the hole nice and wide there for the running back. And it's really good to see. Again, not everything the way you drew it up is how it actually happens. So to see him make a read post snap and then still execute on top of that in the moment read, really quality stuff.
Yeah, and people are like, oh, but what happened? He didn't lock on. This guy spun out. Yeah, well, that guy spun out, and he's not doing his 111. He spins out. The running back reads it, and that guy's, again, to that third level. So good read. This is, playing above the scheme for him. This is him using his head. He's thinking on the fly. He's adjusting post-snap, and he's executing the job needed right there for the running back to make a good cut and get to the next level. It happens so often with him. Watch him on this play. This is a great job of, his showing his hip and core strength. This is against Barmore. And you see Barmore get into his chest right here. And I think Barmore is expecting some kind of stunt. You see him looking this way. I think maybe he was supposed to go this way and maybe expecting this guy to loop inside. I don't know. I think he's looking for some type of stunt. So he just transitions to a power move. He goes to the long arm. But watch, you see the pad level. You see the hips of Davis just drop. And then look at him just anchor down right there. Just stops him enough for Fields to drop a dime down the field, down the middle of the field, to the tight end here of the Crimson Tide. I think it went to right around the 10-yard line. Like, this was just a really nice play versus NFL type talent in Christian Barmore.
Barmore had a monster of a game. He's somebody that has shot up draft boards as being a potential middle of the first round pick. So it's a quality matchup for Davis. You hit the nail on the head with Barmore. It's the same thing I noticed when his head placement right away. I was like, is he looking for the stun? Is he looking for his man inside? And then he's like, okay, forget it. We're looking for his man outside. And he's like, forget it. I'm going to long arm and try and drive. And again, you're not always going to be perfect, but how do you adjust? And we see Davis on that play again against that's NFL caliber talent in Christian Barmore. We see him sink the hips, reset, and do just enough to give his quarterback time. Something that, again, sometimes you just need to get in the way. You just need to be a body. You just need to cause some kind of obstruction. He does it on that play, and it's a quality block.
Yeah, here's another one. He refits his hands, so he doesn't win initial hand placement. Well, watch him just, use that hip and core strength to anchor down. Look, that guy he's not going anywhere. Like, he just totally stones that guy at the line of scrimmage, and the quarterback is able to hold it forever. You see this play in and play out where he's able to absorb the power. Here's Barmore. I think that's Barmore that shoots inside the A gap here. Look at him. Look at the flexibility, the ankle flexion, and his ability to just absorb that power from the Tide pass rusher right there. Again, yes, he's getting walked back, but guess what? The quarterback is still able to hold on to the ball and try to push the ball down the field. That's just a good rep by Wyatt Davis. I know a lot of people are saying, oh, he lost ground. Yeah, you're going to lose ground from time to time, but the fact that he's able to lock down that type of power that really shows how strong he is in his midsection there in his hips.
Yeah, that's like he's out leveraged there. He is higher than the defender, which is not where you ever want to be as an offensive lineman. He's getting wrenched backwards. And yeah, hold it right there. So he's out leveraged. He's getting wrenched back. But to have the core strength and the flexibility and the lower body ability to anchor down and hold, it is the opposite of what we saw happen with John Feliciano against Jones in that AFC Championship. Again, I don't want to compare a college defensive tackle to Jones, who's one of the best defenders in the entire NFL, but Feliciano, time and time again, was not able to anchor down. Once he started getting driven back, he continued to get driven back. And again, to see Wyatt Davis right there anchor down, and even though he kind of started to lose that battle, but he won the rep because of his ability to adjust and because of that core strength he has. And this next one, as he makes the play here, is another quality rep.
Yeah, this is some of that nasty I was talking about. Here comes 46 from the next level. Good pickup by Davis. Again, probably not his initial assignment. Sees a D tackle exit out to the right. And expecting the right tackle to pick him up. He doesn't. But watch the finish of this play. Watch him just throw this guy in just to send a message. Just throws him to the turf. And again, kind of looks him down. Like he's got some of that in him. And I know a lot of, Bills fans and the Bills staff, you like this kind of stuff. Again, watch. Okay, he sees the center getting walked back a little bit. He finds work. What's he do? He goes and eliminates that guy that's pushing the center back. Unfortunately, it's intercepted. But he's that type of guy, man. You see these plays all the time, man. Here's some athleticism here, nice little twist right here, and you see that forearm. Watch initially. Okay, so he doesn't have his hands inside. He's using that forearm to kind of lift and elevate the center of gravity of that rusher inside. But watch him refit his hands inside right there, and then boom, locks him down. He's able to anchor again versus that pass rusher of Alabama. And this was probably my favorite. This was a play that after watching him for a couple of days, I'm like, you know what? I'm kind of meh on him. I'm not really feeling him. But then this play made me go back and look at all of his film again. So watch initially. He initially loses with a nice, strong, powerful swat by the defensive lineman. Kind of sets him off balance, right, Anthony? It sets him off balance, but he stays in the fight. Look at him quickly reset his hands and maintain his balance, gets his hands inside, drops his hips, and then guess what? I'm locking out. Look at that. Just completely stones that power rusher in the face of the quarterback and allows Justin Fields to hold on the ball and try to complete it to one of his receivers.
Yeah, he loses initially, and it could have been easy for him to lose this rep completely, but he loses at the beginning, resets himself, and right there, like he's off balance, he's out of position, he's lost leverage, and he's able to reset and refit, like you said. And then I love that he locks in, engages, and anchors down. We see the sink, and we see him stalemate that defender, and it's a quality end to a rough start of a snap. Again, something that is a testament to his fluidity, his balance, his athleticism. You're not able to readjust like that and make a play like that if you're stiff in your hips, or if you're not athletic, or if you don't have enough lateral movement. He has all those things, so he's able to adjust, which is a good thing because it gives you hope that he doesn't have to win the rep right from the beginning. He might lose off that initial step, but he's quality enough in those multiple areas to readjust, refit, and still get the job done for his quarterback.
Yeah, he's, again, I went back and had to watch him because I wasn't completely sold on him as a prospect. But after watching his film and some of the quickness that he shows in the run game, some of the athleticism that is there that can be developed even more, that's something that it's not talked about a lot at the collegiate level is, they don't really get the opportunity to really groom or develop players. They're so worried about, pushing guys through and, winning championships and getting those, big contracts and whatnot, that a lot of development doesn't happen. So when you have a guy like Wyatt Davis that has flashes of some really good athleticism, has some very good traits that you can, maximize and some traits that at a lower end he could still improve on. I mean, I think he's a guy that could easily go in day two, and I like him as a Bills target because, especially if the Bills stick with a lot of those zone run concepts, he's a guy that will fit right in day one, can start at right guard. I think he would actually challenge Feliciano at right guard, and I think for the reason that in pass protection, because I think he's got some really good tools in that department, and as you saw, there are times where, you're going to lose early on in a rep. But how you recover, how you can use your athleticism, how you can use your hands and refit your hands and use all of your tools in the toolbox. As you saw Wyatt Davis there, I think he's got some very good potential as a right guard, especially in the Bill scheme.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially with again, if we're projecting Cody Ford fitting into left guard, it is such a natural fit to put Davis at right guard. And Liam's got a spot on comment there. I think Davis is a good option if we trade back out of the first, somewhere around 35 to 45. Seems like a good value for him. Some people are throwing him up at the end of day one into the high 30s and the low 20s because of some of that athleticism and what he offers. But to your point, if you're on team trade down like Greg Thompson is and like so many other people are, I'm also a proponent of that, depending on how the first round shakes out. If you can get Davis on day 2, I think that's a really quality get. To your point, I think you can slot him in to right guard. I think he could beat out John Feliciano. He's got certain traits, again, that athleticism, that fluidity, that balance. Those are things you can't really teach, and you can polish his game a little bit and polish some of the technique with his footwork and his hand placement, but
pad level, all of that. Yeah,
1,000%. That can be coached, but you cannot teach fluidity and balance and just God-given flexion in your ankles and hips and torso and core strength. Core strength for an offensive lineman is a really hard thing to find, and he's got it in spades. And Ron brought up. I DM'd you about Miners. Yeah, he did really well at the Senior Bowl. I haven't gone through the tape yet.
He's a nasty dude. He's nasty. I like him, and I know his film is hard to come by, but I did uncover a stash of his film. I just haven't gotten to it, and I personally don't think he's a guy that's probably going to go this early as some of the guys that we talked about. But he does have some very good traits. Obviously, competition and level of competition is going to be a big thing, but he showed he can hang with the big boys at the Senior Bowl. I haven't watched him yet, and I haven't really dug into him too much. I know Anthony probably hasn't as well, but he's a guy we are going to be taking a look at, down the line, and we'll probably cover him in some fashion in our notebooks or scouting a journey along the way, because he's a fun guy, kind of like Dickerson, where he has some of that nastiness that we love to see, and we can make a whole film session about it, because that's what we do here. We love to break down film. So Ron, eventually we'll get to it, and being a Slack member and premium subscriber, that we will cover some of it, whether it's in the Slack channel, on Twitter, or in the film room here. So with that said, guys, we appreciate everyone tuning in. The conversations were great. I know you guys love these episodes when we take a look at the offense and defensive line. We're going to switch it up again next week. Going to do a running back breakdown with Jarrett Patterson at UB. If you haven't heard, Wednesday, 7:00 Eastern. Next week, he and I will be sitting down in the film room. I'm excited to look at his film from this year. I watched a lot of his 2019 stuff last year just for fun, and he and I have been DMing ever since then. And so we're going to be finding a few plays to break down with him to kind of showcase his talent and skills. So be on a lookout for that next week live. Again, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Anthony, thanks for joining me. Let everyone know when and where they can find you on social media and Disguise coverage.
So again, I am Anthony, host of Disguise Coverage on the Cover One Network. You can find that every Thursday night live at 9 p.m. on multiple streaming platforms. And you can find the audio versions on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, pretty much anywhere and everywhere you will find podcasts, you will find Disguise Coverage. And then find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro, 2_ ANT. And that's where you can find me, in addition to being here on the film room.
All right, Anthony, man, another good breakdown, another extended breakdown of Landon Dickerson, Creed Humphrey, and Wyatt Davis. We appreciate everyone tuning in. I'm your host, Eric Turner. Make sure to join us next week in the film room. That's Anthony Prohaska. Make sure, actually, it should be probably that way. Hey, that's Anthony Prohaska from Disguise Coverage, and we will see you next week, guys. Take it easy.